At the heart of the wide and rolling plain stood a village unlike any other, a place cradled by wind, sunlight, and the shelter of a sacred tree so vast that its branches seemed to touch the very heavens. Its trunk was wide enough for 10 men to encircle with their arms, and its roots wove deep into the earth like veins of life itself. The villagers called it Aluwa, the tree that holds the sky, for they believed that if it ever withered, the heavens would collapse and the world would be swallowed by endless night. Beneath its canopy the air was cool and rich with the scent of soil and sap. Birds built their nests among its branches, and children played around its roots, tracing their hands over the carvings their ancestors had left in its bark. To live in its shadow was considered a blessing, and the people treated the land as though it were alive, breathing, feeling, and listening. Every morning, when the first rays of dawn touched the crown of the tree, the villagers would gather with bowls of fresh water and handfuls of grain to offer to Aluwa. They sang songs of gratitude, voices blending with the wind that rustled the leaves. Their songs were not just praise, they were promises to live gently, to take only what they needed, and to treat the earth as kin. The elders said the tree listened to these vows. Its leaves shimmered brighter when the people lived in kindness, and its shade deepened when the land was content. The villagers believed that the tree's roots stretched not only into the earth but also into their spirits, binding every heart in harmony. The village was a place where life pulsed with rhythm and reverence. Women ground millet beneath the sun, laughter echoing through the air, while men returned from the fields carrying baskets heavy with yams and maize. Children ran barefoot through the dust, chasing each other with songs, their joy like a breeze that kept the village young. Even the animals, goats, hens, and dogs, seemed to live in gentle peace beneath the tree's endless shade. Each evening, smoke curled upward from cooking fires, mingling with the golden light that filtered through the canopy. The scent of roasted corn, herbs, and rain-washed leaves filled the air, carrying the heartbeat of a people who knew no greed. Among the villagers, stories were told at twilight, when the shadows grew long and the sky blazed orange. The elders spoke of how the tree came to hold the sky. Long ago, they said, when the earth was still young and the sun wandered too close, the heavens began to fall. The people wept and prayed, and from their tears grew this tree, its roots clutching the world, its branches pushing the heavens back into place. Since then, the balance of all things, rain and drought, joy and sorrow, birth and death, rested in its towering grace. But the tree's true power, they said, came not from its size, nor from the soil that fed it, but from the hearts of those who lived beneath it. The kindness of the people was the breath that kept its leaves alive. A selfish act could make its branches tremble, a cruel word could dim its light. And so, generation after generation, the villagers lived by one sacred truth, that the world itself listens to the heart of humankind. For as long as they honored that truth, the tree would hold the sky, and the sky would bless them in return. In this village, beneath the ever-reaching arms of Aluwa, harmony was not just a way of life, it was the rhythm of existence itself. Amma was born beneath the shade of the great tree, her first cry said to have made its leaves tremble with joy. From the moment she could walk, she carried a calm presence that seemed to soothe both people and earth alike. When she touched the soil, seeds sprouted faster. When she sang, even the restless wind seemed to slow and listen. Her laughter, soft and bright, was a sound that made weary hearts light again. The villagers said she carried a blessing, a gift from the tree itself, a heart so pure that nature could not help but respond to it. Wherever she went, children followed, flowers bloomed, and sick animals stirred back to life. Amma lived with her stepmother, Noro, and her elder stepsister, Sefu. Their home stood at the edge of the village, close enough to hear the evening songs but far enough that the shadows of envy could grow undisturbed. Noro, once kind before her husband's passing, had grown cold and wary. She saw Amma's gentleness not as a blessing, but as a dangerous light, one that drew others' affection away from her own daughter. Her love belonged to Sefu alone, a girl of striking beauty and fiery pride. Sefu was strong, with skin like polished mahogany and eyes that gleamed with confidence. Yet beneath her poise lay a deep, aching jealousy, for no matter how she dressed, sang, or danced, the people's hearts always turned toward Amma. The villagers often came to Amma for help. They brought the sick, the weak, and the broken. With her hands, she washed wounds in water drawn from beneath the sacred tree, whispering words of comfort as she worked. She never asked for reward, only that they care for one another. In return, the villagers blessed her name during their prayers. Children ran to greet her when she walked through the market, handing her garlands of flowers and bits of fruit. To them, Amma was light, quiet, steady, and kind. Sefu watched these moments from afar, bitterness curling inside her like a thorned vine. They love you because you pretend to be humble, she once hissed as Amma tended to a wounded bird. But kindness fades and beauty fades. When that tree dies, your gift will die too. Amma looked up, her eyes soft and patient. The tree will live as long as our hearts stay kind, sister, she said. Even its roots know love when they feel it. Sephu turned away, hiding the sting in her chest. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, feeding her envy. You must not let her outshine you. Her meekness is a trick. Noro's favoritism only widened the distance between them. She praised Sephu's every word, every gesture, while criticizing Amma for imagined faults. If Sephu broke a pot, Noro blamed Amma. If the cooking fire dimmed, it was Amma's fault for not tending it right. Yet Amma never spoke back. She smiled faintly, swallowed her pain, and continued to serve them both with quiet devotion. Her silence infuriated Sephu even more, for it made her cruelty feel small and childish. At night, Amma would sit beneath the sacred tree, whispering her hopes into the wind. May my sister find peace in her heart, she would murmur. The tree's leaves would rustle in response as though listening. In the moonlight, her shadow would merge with the trees, two shapes intertwined, one human, one ancient, as if nature itself embraced her loneliness. But deep within that same night, Sephu would watch from the window, her envy burning hotter with each passing moon. She saw how the world bent gently around Amma, how the wind lifted her hair like a crown, how even the stars seemed to shimmer brighter when she smiled. Sephu's pride could not bear it. And though she did not yet know it, her jealousy was calling something darker from beneath the earth, something that stirred whenever hearts turned cruel beneath the great tree's shade. Two sisters stood beneath the same sky, but only one carried its light. The other, consumed by shadow, was beginning to forget that both light and shadow were born from the same sun. The Festival of Winds came once every year when the air grew warm and playful, and the skies above the village shimmered like silk. It was the time when the people honored the spirits of the sky. Those who held the clouds, carried the rains, and whispered through the branches of the sacred tree that was said to keep heaven from falling. The festival was a tapestry of color and sound. Drums thundered through the hills, dancers twirled with ribbons that caught the sunlight, and children released woven fans into the wind, watching them glide and vanish into the blue. On that morning, Amma awoke early. The air was cool and filled with the soft scent of river mist. She helped the elders hang garlands across the village square, her laughter mingling with the chirping of birds. Her hands moved with grace and purpose, her presence gentle but magnetic. Even the leaves seemed to turn toward her when she passed. Villagers greeted her warmly, their faces glowing with affection. The spirits smile when Amma smiles, one old woman said, pressing a flower into her palm. Amma blushed and shook her head. It is not me, she replied softly. It is the wind that carries joy, not I. Sephu stood nearby, her jaw tightening. She wore her finest garments, a flowing wrap dyed in deep crimson, beads that shimmered against her skin, but still the villagers' eyes drifted past her to Amma. No matter how brightly she dressed, Amma's simple white cloth seemed to outshine her. Her stepmother Noro noticed this too. Do not let them forget who you are, my daughter, she whispered sharply to Sephu. Charm them. Speak boldly. Show them you are not lesser. But Sephu's heart was already heavy. Every smile Amma received struck her like an arrow. When the drums began to slow, the crowd gathered near the sacred tree for the elders' blessing. The wind picked up, soft but steady, swirling around Amma's ankles like an invisible ribbon. One of the elders, a tall man with silver hair and deep, weathered eyes, lifted his hands toward the sky. The spirits are restless tonight, he said. They seek one whose heart beats in rhythm with the wind. At his words, the breeze seemed to answer, lifting Amma's hair, scattering petals around her like stars. She looked startled, glancing upward as if to apologize to the heavens for the attention. But the people murmured in awe. It's her, a voice whispered. The daughter of balance. The elder turned to Amma with a gentle smile. Child of the winds, your voice carries the harmony of the sky and the earth. May you always walk in peace. He placed a garland woven from silver leaves around her neck. The drums resumed softly and the people began to chant her name. Amma, 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 their voices carrying into the open air. Sephu's hands clenched at her sides. Her mother shot her a look, one part warning, one part frustration, but it was too late. The seed of bitterness had already taken root. When the dancers spun again, Sephu forced herself to join, her movements sharp, almost frantic, as if trying to cut through the joy that surrounded Amma. But no matter how fiercely she danced, the wind refused her. It whirled lovingly around Amma instead, lifting petals and fabric in gentle waves. That night, when the celebration slowed and the stars blinked awake, Amma stood at the edge of the hill, looking over the glowing village below. The garland still hung around her neck, and the wind played softly with her braids. "I do not deserve such honor," she whispered to the air. The breeze brushed her cheek in reply, a tender acknowledgement. Behind her, hidden in the shadows of the tree, Sephu watched in silence. The light that wrapped around Amma was unbearable to look at. Her envy was no longer quiet, it roared within her like a storm waiting to break. And as the wind swayed through the branches above, the great tree creaked, not in anger but in sorrow, for it could already feel that the balance between love and envy was beginning to unravel. That night the air was unnaturally still. The drums had long fallen silent, and the last embers of the festival fires glowed faintly like tired eyes. The wind that usually whispered through the sacred tree was gone, leaving behind a strange and heavy quiet. Even the crickets seemed to hold their breath. Inside the small clay hut she shared with her stepsister, Sephu lay awake, her mind tangled in shadows darker than the night outside. Amma slept peacefully beside her, her face illuminated by the faint moonlight slipping through the cracks in the wall. Her hair, long, thick and radiant, spilled across the mat like threads of night spun with starlight. It shimmered faintly as she breathed, almost as if alive. The elders said each strand of Amma's hair carried the blessing of the sky, linking her spirit to the balance of nature itself. To the jealous heart of Sephu, those strands looked like chains that bound her to obscurity. Why must everything belong to her? Sephu whispered, her voice trembling with anger and grief. Her mother's earlier words echoed in her mind, "They see her as divine. If you don't act, you'll live in her shadow forever." Jealousy had become her poison, seeping deep into her thoughts until she could no longer tell love from hate. Sephu rose quietly, her movements deliberate. She reached for the knife hidden beneath a woven basket, a small blade with a bone handle sharp enough to slice a whisper of air. The moonlight caught its edge as she approached Amma, her heartbeat thundering in her chest. For a moment she hesitated. Amma's face, so serene, looked almost angelic. The girl who had never spoken harshly, who had shared her food, her laughter, her kindness without measure, she did not deserve harm. But envy is a flame that consumes all reason. With a deep breath, Sephu knelt beside her sleeping sister and grasped the first lock of her hair. The strands were cool to the touch, pulsing faintly with warmth as though the stars themselves flowed through them. The moment the blade touched them, a low rumble rolled through the ground, a sound like distant thunder. Sephu froze, terrified, but it was too late. She cut again, and again. Each strand fell to the floor, glowing faintly before fading into stillness. Outside the great tree shuddered. Its mighty branches creaked as if groaning in pain. The leaves, once full of life, began to tremble violently before drifting down like tears from the heavens. Amma stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Sephu?" she whispered, her voice weak and confused. Her hand reached up, feeling the jagged ends of her hair. "What have you done?" Sephu stumbled backward, knife trembling in her grasp. "You don't understand," she hissed, panic rising in her chest. "They worship you. They forget me. You were meant to share the light, not hoard it." But Amma's tears had already begun to fall. The ground beneath her mat pulsed as if alive, absorbing each tear into the earth. A strong gust of wind slammed through the hut, blowing out the fire in the hearth. The walls rattled. Outside, dogs howled and birds scattered into the dark sky. Suddenly, the sacred tree in the heart of the village released a sound so deep and mournful that even the mountains seemed to echo it. Leaves fell in torrents, covering the ground in a golden storm. The sky itself seemed to respond. Clouds rolled in, heavy and black, swallowing the stars one by one. Amma knelt on the floor, her hands trembling as she picked up a fallen strand. It glowed faintly before disintegrating into dust, leaving a faint sparkle in her palm. "The balance," she whispered. "You've broken it." Sephu's heart twisted in horror as the realization struck her. She had not merely wounded her sister, she had wounded the very breath of the world around them. Then without another word, Amma stood. The wind swirled around her again, faint and wounded but alive. Her eyes shimmered with tears and starlight. "You cannot cut what the sky has blessed," she said softly. "The roots will remember. The sky will weep." That night, as Sephu fled into the darkness, lightning danced silently across the clouds, and the sacred tree shed the last of its leaves. The earth groaned in sorrow, the winds wailed through the hills, and above it all, the stars seemed dimmer, as if mourning the betrayal that had fallen upon their child. "You said Amma's breath came in ragged gasps as she stumbled through the sleeping village, clutching the uneven ends of her shorn hair. The night air was cold and sharp, filled with the faint rustle of the sacred tree's dying leaves. Each step she took echoed like a heartbeat in the hollow silence that followed the betrayal. Behind her, the hut where she had once laughed with her sister now stood still, a shell of broken trust. She reached the foot of the sacred hills, where the earth met the sky in soft slopes covered in mist. The moon hid behind clouds as if it too could not bear to witness her pain. Amma fell to her knees, trembling, her tears mixing with the dust on her hands. Her once glorious hair, now hacked unevenly and lifeless, hung like a memory of what had been. In her hands she still clutched the fallen strands, glowing faintly, their light flickering like dying embers. Each strand felt alive, pulsing weakly as if mourning. "Why?" she whispered to the stars hidden above. "Why must goodness be punished by envy? Why must light suffer for shining?" No answer came. Only the wind, slow and mournful, sweeping across the hills. Amma dug into the soil with her bare hands, her fingers raw and trembling. She carved a small hollow in the ground and placed the strands inside, her tears falling freely upon them. "If my hair no longer belongs to me," she said through sobs, "then let it belong to the earth. Let it grow where no hand can harm it again." As her tears soaked the soil, a strange tremor rippled through the ground. The air shifted. The silence deepened. Amma froze, her breath catching in her throat. From beneath her hands the soil began to stir, faintly at first, then with growing urgency. Thin tendrils, soft as silk, pushed through the earth. Roots, delicate, glowing, alive. Amma fell back, watching in disbelief as they spread outward, winding around stones and curling toward the sky. They moved like veins of light, connecting earth and air, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. The more she cried, the faster they grew, branching and twisting, shimmering with the faint glow of starlight. The hills shuddered as if exhaling after centuries of stillness. Cracks opened in the soil, and from them, thicker roots surged upward, glowing gold and green. The wind picked up, swirling around Amma, lifting her tears from her cheeks like silver droplets. Her sorrow had awakened something ancient, something that remembered balance and pain, betrayal and love. In the village below, people awoke to the sound of the earth's groan. Dogs barked, children cried, and elders stumbled from their huts. They looked toward the hills and gasped. A soft golden light pulsed along the slopes, spreading like veins of fire through the night. The sacred tree shivered, its remaining branches quivering as the roots beneath the earth began to move, drawn to Amma's tears, to her offering, to her grief. Amma bowed her head as the roots surrounded her, forming spirals that pulsed with light. Her hair began to shimmer faintly once more, as though remembering its lost strength. She could feel the pulse of the world, the heartbeat of the roots, the sigh of the hills, the whisper of the wind through the stars. "You cannot destroy what is born of truth," a voice murmured inside her, deep and resonant, like the voice of the earth itself. The ground settled slowly, but the light remained, a warm, living glow radiating from the hillsides. The roots spread wider, connecting with the great tree in the village, weaving an unseen bond between Amma's pain and the sky above. As dawn broke, villagers climbed the hills and fell to their knees. Flowers began to bloom along the path where Amma's tears had fallen, glowing with soft, silver petals that mirrored the stars. The people wept in awe, realizing that what had been done in cruelty had only deepened the world's beauty. Amma stood in silence, the wind tangling gently through her broken hair. She no longer felt anger, only an aching calm. Her sorrow had rooted itself into the earth, and in doing so, had become something eternal. The roots beneath her feet whispered softly, promising that though pain could cut, it could also grow, binding heaven and earth, shadow and light, forever. The morning sun broke through the clouds, but it was not light alone that brightened the land, it was something far deeper, something born from Amma's sorrow. From the sacred hills where she had buried her hair, the earth now shimmered with veins of light. The roots that had begun to sprout in the night pulsed with a soft, golden glow, spreading outward like rivers of fire beneath the soil. They reached far and wide, crawling across fields and paths, wrapping gently around stones, and extending toward the great sacred tree that had once shaded the village in harmony. At first, the villagers thought it was lightning trapped in the ground. They stood at a distance, shielding their eyes from the brilliance. But when the wind carried the scent of blossoms, sweet, clean, and unlike anything they had known, fear turned to wonder. Amma stood upon the hills, her bare feet resting upon the trembling earth. The roots responded to her presence, curling upward around her like living ribbons. Their glow reflected in her eyes, making her appear as though the sun itself had found a home within her. She could feel them breathing, pulsing with the rhythm of her own heart, and when she raised her hands toward the sky, the roots followed, stretching higher, rising like pillars of light. The sky, once heavy and dark from Sefu's betrayal, began to open. The gray clouds broke apart and a soft blue light spilled through. The roots reached upward, slow, graceful, unstoppable, until their tips disappeared into the clouds. They intertwined like golden threads, forming a vast, luminous bridge between earth and sky. The wind stilled, the air shimmered, and every living thing seemed to pause, watching the miracle unfold. Storms that had lingered for days quieted as if soothed by the sight. Rivers that had overflowed now flowed clear and calm. The sacred tree in the village straightened its bowed branches, and new leaves unfurled, gleaming like emeralds in sunlight. Birds returned to its canopy, singing songs that no one had heard in seasons. Flowers burst from the soil, red, violet, gold, blooming in waves that followed the paths of the roots. The villagers fell to their knees, awestruck. The elders whispered prayers, tears glinting on their cheeks. "The earth answers her," one murmured. "Her spirit touches both soil and sky." Mothers held their children close, pointing toward the glowing hills. "Look well," they said softly. "This is what the heart of truth can do." Even those who had doubted Amma's purity now trembled with remorse. They remembered her gentle kindness, the way she had tended the sick, the laughter that once filled the air. Now they understood that her hair, which Sefu had destroyed, had been no mere beauty. It had been a sacred bond, a thread between heaven and the living world. Sefu herself stood hidden among the crowd, unable to speak. Her heart pounded as she watched the roots dance in the light of morning. The very strands she had severed now reached beyond her sight, carrying with them Amma's unbroken spirit. She wanted to cry, but her throat felt dry and hollow. Amma looked toward the village but did not move. Her gaze was calm, neither vengeful nor proud. The roots beneath her feet thrummed softly, and a voice, not spoken but felt, passed through the air. It came from everywhere at once, from the wind, from the blossoms, from the pulse of the ground. "When kindness is cut, it grows again," the voice said. "When truth is buried, it finds the sky." The villagers bowed their heads. They could no longer deny that the sacred balance had chosen its guardian, and that guardian was the very girl they had failed to protect. The hills glowed brighter as the roots spread one final time, their tips weaving into the clouds. Then slowly the light softened. The roots settled into stillness, their glow fading to a quiet shimmer beneath the grass. Flowers continued to bloom in their wake, their petals radiant and alive. The air smelled of rain and hope. Amma turned toward the horizon where the sun now rose, its light golden and full. The roots that had touched the sky whispered farewell as the wind carried their hum through the valley. From that day onward, the villagers said the heavens and the earth were no longer apart. They had been bound forever by the courage of one girl's heart. And when storms came, they no longer feared them, for they knew the roots that touched the sky still held the world in balance. And Amma's spirit watched over them in every petal, every breeze, and every ray of morning light. As nights passed, Sefu found no rest. The house that once felt like her sanctuary now echoed with sounds she couldn't explain. Faint crackling beneath the floors, soft whispers that rose and fell like the rustling of leaves. At first, she tried to ignore them, convincing herself they were the wind. But the whispers grew louder, shaping themselves into words that chilled her bones. "Amma," they said softly. "Amma is not gone." Sefu would jolt awake, her body drenched in sweat. Her eyes darted across the room, but there was no one there, only the faint outline of roots creeping along the corners of her floor, thin as veins, glowing faintly in the dark. She would fall to her knees and scratch at them, screaming for them to stop, but the more she tore at the wood, the stronger they seemed to grow. Her mother began to notice the change. Sefu no longer smiled at the market or joined the other girls by the river. Her once glossy hair had dulled, and her eyes, once sharp and proud, now darted around as if haunted by unseen shadows. When her mother asked what troubled her, Sefu lied, saying she was merely unwell. But deep inside she knew the truth. Every night Amma's voice found her. Not angry, not vengeful, but unbearably gentle. "Sefu," it whispered, "why did you cut what the sky had blessed?" The tone was soft, but each word pierced deeper than any blade could. Sefu would cover her ears, weeping, begging the voice to stop. Yet the more she begged, the more tender Amma's words became, and that kindness was what broke her most. The villagers too began to talk. Strange vines were growing across Sefu's home, bright green tendrils that bloomed with small, sky-blue flowers. Children gathered to look, whispering that Amma's spirit had blessed the land but cursed Sephu's house. When Sephu tried to cut the vines away, they grew back overnight, thicker and stronger, wrapping around her windows and doors as if the house itself was being swallowed. One night, unable to bear it any longer, Sephu fled to the sacred tree. She fell to her knees before its great roots, now pulsing faintly with light, the same light she saw beneath her floor. "Please," she cried into the soil, "take away these dreams. I'm sorry. I was jealous, I didn't mean to hurt her." The wind answered her with a low moan, carrying the scent of rain and soil. The roots beneath her trembled, and for a moment she thought she heard Amma's laughter, distant, kind, and forgiving. "Forgive yourself," it whispered, "and you will find peace." But forgiveness did not come easily. Sephu returned home, but she could no longer eat or sleep. Every mirror showed not her face but flashes of Amma's, serene and radiant, surrounded by vines and blossoms. The guilt grew heavier until it pressed against her chest like a stone. She would wander through the village, hair unkempt, muttering apologies to the wind. The villagers pitied her. Some said she was cursed for her cruelty, others said the spirits were teaching her the cost of envy. But no one dared to approach her house anymore, for the roots had now pushed through the walls, wrapping around it like arms in an eternal embrace. Sephu finally realized the truth. The roots that haunted her were not a curse but a reminder. They connected the heavens and the earth, the living and the lost, the betrayer and the betrayed. Amma's spirit had not sought revenge, it had sought balance. That night as she lay on her bed the whisper came again, "Be still, Sephu. The roots forgive." Tears streamed down her face as she whispered back, "Then may they take me too." And with that she closed her eyes, the sound of roots growing softly beneath her, like a lullaby, carrying her guilt away into the earth. At dawn, the first drops of rain kissed the earth after many months of drought. They fell gently at first, like tears from the heavens, soaking into the soil around the sacred tree. The villagers gathered beneath it in awe, for something extraordinary was unfolding before their eyes. The great tree, once fading and brittle, began to stir. Its leaves shimmered faintly with light, and the air around it hummed with energy, the same soft glow that had spread from the roots where Amma had once wept. The roots, born from her buried hair, had stretched through the hills, through the village, and now wrapped themselves lovingly around the tree's massive trunk. The connection was complete, the earth and sky, reunited through the spirit of one pure heart. As the roots merged with the tree, the ground trembled, not in anger but in awakening. The villagers fell to their knees as a wind swept through the fields, carrying the scent of wet soil, wild blossoms and renewal. The clouds, dark and swollen, broke open, and rain poured freely for the first time in a generation. Children laughed and ran through the puddles, shouting Amma's name as though calling to the sky itself. Elders raised their hands, tears mingling with the rain, whispering prayers of gratitude. "The daughter of balance has returned," they said. "Her spirit keeps the world in harmony." The sacred tree began to glow, faintly at first, then brighter, its branches illuminated with the soft radiance of starlight. The villagers swore they could see faces among the leaves, gentle and smiling, the faces of ancestors watching from the heavens. Birds returned, perching on its boughs and singing songs unheard for years. Even the dry rivers began to stir, trickling back to life as the rain fed them. But while the village celebrated, one heart remained restless, Sephu's. She stood at a distance, drenched by the rain, staring at the glowing tree that seemed to breathe with Amma's spirit. The villagers did not look at her with anger anymore. They pitied her, whispering that even the sky had forgiven what she could not forgive in herself. Inside her chest, guilt pulsed like a second heartbeat. She remembered the night she cut Amma's hair, the cold metal against her fingers, the cruel satisfaction she'd felt when she saw the strands fall. But now those same strands had become the roots that saved them all. Her act of envy had been transformed into a bridge between worlds, a reminder that even cruelty could give birth to beauty when touched by forgiveness. Sephu fell to her knees in the mud. "Amma," she whispered, her voice breaking, "you gave life even when I took yours away. You rose when I wanted you gone. How can I live knowing I am the reason for both your suffering and our salvation?" A breeze moved through the rain, warm and gentle, carrying a familiar fragrance, the scent of Amma's favorite flowers. And in that breeze she heard a soft voice, "The roots forgive. So must you." Sephu bowed her head, pressing her hands into the wet soil. "Then let me serve your roots," she murmured. "Let me be part of your gift to this world." From that day on, Sephu never left the tree's side. She tended its roots, cleared the vines around its base, and offered fresh water from the river each morning. Though the villagers still whispered, they came to see her devotion as penance and healing. The rains continued, bringing new life to every field. The harvests grew richer, the rivers sang louder, and the children learned the story of the sisters. One who was kind, one who was jealous, and both who became part of the world's balance. At night, when the moon rose and the stars shimmered above, the tree glowed softly, its branches alive with threads of light that stretched upward, as if holding the sky in place. The villagers called it the awakening of the sky tree. And in its glow, they swore they could hear the faint harmony of two voices, one of sorrow, one of peace, blending into the rhythm of the earth. But Sephu, even as she tended the sacred ground, never truly smiled again. For though the tree forgave her, she carried her remorse like a shadow, knowing that forgiveness from others was a gift, but forgiving oneself was a battle only the heart could win. The morning after the great rain, mist curled low over the green hills, carrying the scent of new life. Birds sang softly, and the earth shimmered with dew, but Sephu's heart remained heavy. While the village rejoiced, she felt the weight of her sin pressing deeper into her soul. Every blossom, every shining root that stretched toward the sky reminded her of what she had destroyed, and what Amma's spirit had healed in spite of her cruelty. Unable to bear the whispers of the villagers or the silent forgiveness of the glowing tree, Sephu set out alone toward the sacred hills. She carried with her the rusted pair of scissors, the very one she had used to cut Amma's hair. Each step felt like a confession. The soil beneath her feet was soft from rain, and the wind seemed to sigh her name as if urging her onward. When she reached the place where Amma had once wept, Sephu fell to her knees. The ground was alive, roots pulsed beneath the surface, glowing faintly like veins of light. The air hummed with an energy she could feel in her bones. Tears streamed down her face as she clutched the scissors, their cold metal now dull and stained with rust. "Forgive me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Amma, I took what was sacred. I took what made you shine. I wanted your light to die because I could not bear its beauty beside my shadow. I see now that you never wanted to outshine me, only to love me." Her tears fell into the soil, and the roots beneath her stirred. The earth seemed to breathe, responding to her sorrow. For the first time, Sephu did not run from the whispers of the roots. She bowed her head low and pressed the scissors into the ground. "These were my cruelty," she said softly. "Let them never harm another soul." As soon as the metal touched the soil, something miraculous began to happen. The roots, slender and glowing, reached up from the earth and coiled gently around the scissors. The vines twined upward, curling delicately as if embracing the object rather than rejecting it. Slowly, before Sephu's tear-filled eyes, the dull metal began to shimmer, transforming into strands of radiant gold. The roots thickened, weaving together until the scissors were no longer a symbol of envy and destruction, but of transformation and repentance. The golden vines glowed brighter, stretching higher into the air, then gently curved back toward Sephu. They brushed against her hands, wrapping around her wrists like soft bracelets of light. A warmth spread through her body, not punishment but peace. She felt Amma's presence there, in the hum of the roots, in the light of the vines, in the quiet forgiveness that seemed to cradle her heart. "My sister," Sephu whispered, tears falling freely, "you've turned my sin into a bridge. You've made beauty from my bitterness. How can I ever repay a soul so kind?" And again the breeze stirred, carrying a voice faint and tender, "By choosing to grow even from your pain." Sephu bowed her head, weeping into the soil. The roots beneath her began to weave themselves into patterns, spreading outward in spirals of gold that caught the rising sunlight. When she finally stood, her hands still glowed faintly from where the vines had touched her. She felt lighter, not freed from her past but no longer trapped by it. When she returned to the village, the people gathered in silence. They saw the golden vines twining from her hands like living bracelets and understood what she had done. No one spoke. They simply knelt with her as she whispered a prayer of thanks to the heavens and to Amma's enduring spirit. That night, the great tree shone more brilliantly than ever before. The golden vines that had once been the scissors appeared among its roots, visible even in the dark, shimmering softly as though touched by starlight. The elders declared them sacred, symbols of remorse turned into renewal. They named the spot where Sephu knelt, the Hill of Forgiveness. From that day forward, those who had wronged others came to that hill to lay their burdens in the soil. They would plant something, a seed, a flower, a token, and watch as the roots transformed their sorrow into life. And as for Sephu, she spent her remaining days tending to the tree and teaching the children that even broken things could be made whole again. She wore no crown, carried no pride, only the golden marks on her wrists that shimmered whenever the sun touched them. In her humility, the people saw not the girl who had once betrayed her sister, but the woman who had learned the deepest truth of the earth, that forgiveness, like roots, grows strongest where tears have fallen. Generations passed, and the once small village beneath the great tree became a place of pilgrimage. The sacred tree towered higher than ever, its roots thick and luminous beneath the soil, its leaves whispering softly with every breath of wind. No one alive remembered the day when darkness fell over the land or when envy tried to cut through the bond of love, but every heart knew the story, the legend of Amma, the girl whose hair became the roots that held the sky. Children grew up sitting beneath the tree's vast canopy, listening to elders tell how one act of cruelty had nearly torn the balance of earth and heaven apart, and how compassion had stitched it back together. They learned that Amma's hair, once shorn in jealousy, had taken root in the sacred hills and grown into the luminous veins of the world itself. Her spirit, pure and forgiving, had become the lifeblood of the tree that touched both soil and stars. It was said that when the wind rustled through the branches, it carried a melody, a soft hum that echoed Amma's voice. Parents would hush their children and say, "Listen closely. That is Amma's song, the song of forgiveness." The tune was gentle and full of grace, neither sad nor triumphant, but steady like the pulse of life itself. The villagers came to believe that as long as the tree sang, peace would remain between the earth and the sky. Over time, the roots of the sacred tree grew so vast they were said to cradle the village from beneath, wrapping around homes and hills like invisible arms of protection. The rains always fell softly there, the crops never failed, and the river never dried. When storms threatened the nearby lands, the tree's light glowed faintly, calming the winds. The elders said it was Amma's spirit holding the balance, her forgiveness anchoring the sky itself. Every year, on the night of the first full moon of the harvest season, the villagers gathered beneath the great tree for the festival of roots. They lit lamps of gold and green, placing them among the glowing roots to honor Amma's memory. Women braided their hair with vines and flowers, singing songs of love and reconciliation. The oldest elder would tell the story of the two sisters, how one had been blinded by envy, and how the other had answered cruelty with kindness so strong it shaped the heavens. "No power is greater than a heart that forgives," the elder would say, voice trembling with reverence. Amma's roots did not grow to punish. They grew to remind us that what we bury in love can rise to hold the sky. As the festival continued, the villagers would sing the song believed to have been Amma's. The wind always seemed to join them, weaving through the leaves with a voice that sounded almost human, a voice that soothed and healed. Some claimed they could see the faint shimmer of a woman's form among the branches, her hair made of light, her eyes calm as dawn. Others swore that when they closed their eyes and touched the roots, they felt her presence like a heartbeat beneath the soil. Children grew up planting small trees in her name. Each seedling was seen as a promise, that love, once rooted, would never die. And so the land flourished, blessed by the lesson that no cruelty could ever overcome compassion, no shadow could dim the light born of forgiveness. Travelers from faraway lands came to see the sacred tree that held the sky, and when they asked the meaning of the golden vines at its roots, the villagers would tell them softly, those were the scissors, the blades that once cut, now turned to gold by grace. And as the years folded into centuries, the story remained, changing in form but never in heart. The children still looked up at the great branches, feeling the wind hum through them, and whispered the ancient words taught by their elders. They cut her hair to humble her, but her roots held the sky. The proverb lived on, carved into stones, sung in lullabies, whispered in prayers. And each time the wind sang through the leaves, it reminded the world that love, pure, forgiving and steadfast, can turn even sorrow into something that upholds the heavens.